Metaverse.
You know, Tyranth,
What's that, Chad?
we have compared the katana to a lot of swords.
We have.
Actually, not really. Mostly we compare it to the longsword.
Well, that's because that's what people want to see.
Yes, and we have done that in a lot of depth on the channel, being as fair as we can sometimes, where it's like, okay, yes, longsword has a reach advantage, but there are some longswords that are just shorter, and so if you went to the bastard sword, like comparing it, you know, in length, vastly more comparable.
I mean, if we're going to do a quick summary, I think a double-edged sword is always better, and the reason why I think that is because practicality. If you're out there using a sword and one edge gets damaged, guess what? You have a spare. On top of that, you have a crossguard that is very easy to use for offense and defense.
Versatility.
On top of, like...
But reverse edge cuts, but okay, we've done that a lot.
Sorry, we didn't mean to get into that.
It triggers us. But what about rapier versus katana?
Funnily enough, I feel like it's all the same things, just worse.
Maybe. This is going to be a casual discussion on the pros and cons of the rapier versus katana. Now, is it a fair matchup? Because usually people default to, okay, what is the primary sword of the samurai? The katana. Even though in the battlefield it was more the tashi, which is similar to something like this.
Sure.
Okay? But they always default to katana, not tashi or katana or anything.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, what's the default sword of the European equivalent, the knight? Longsword. And that's where the matchup kind of comes into,
Yes.
right? But even then, I think bastard sword versus katana is a fairer matchup, and maybe katana versus longsword, fairer matchup. And then we've even done katana versus mesa.
Yeah. And there's so many different caveats here. There's so much like context, but in a general sense, especially if we're talking like modern day weapons and steels and stuff like that, I love katanas. They are drop dead. I just literally built one. I just built my own. I love katanas.
They're gorgeous.
But if I'm actually talking about what I would use, what I would go with.
I'm not sure if the review for this is out yet or not.
I don't know.
But this is like my new favorite katana, and it's an katana. It's big, and that's why I love it. And it cuts like a beast.
And it's interesting because I feel like people think that we come at this from like, we don't like katanas. I love katanas.
Yes.
But if you pose me the question and you say, what is objectively a better sword? Now, obviously, styles come into play,
Yes.
sure. And obviously, you get good, you know, user experience also comes into play. But if we're talking about the tools themselves, there's obvious positives and obvious negatives to different things.
Yeah, and we have a dedicated video on the rapier, right? And in that discussion, I kind of come to the conclusion that I think the rapier is probably the most optimized dueling deadly sword ever made. And in that sense, it is even superior to the longsword. It is an optimized deadly sword. And the reason why, the optimization is to make it more effective in its lethality.
Yes.
Okay.
And take like a rapier, I love rapiers as well. I would choose a longsword over a rapier simply because a bit more generalized versatility, where this is a bit more, it's poke centric, right? And I like having the ability to have a second hand on a little bit more, but the guard is better on like a swept hill.
This is the thing. I would probably only pick a longsword over a rapier currently because I'm more trained in the longsword. I have not trained nearly as much in the rapier. I would feel awkward with it. I wouldn't be able to fight nearly as effectively. But as a result, I actually think if I fought someone who was trained in a rapier, even though I'm more proficient with a longsword than using it, I think someone who is as proficient in a rapier as I am with a longsword, they would have an advantage and probably beat me most of the time.
But keep in mind, in a generalized sense, a sword is a tool, and if I was using it as a tool, I want to be able to still have the option to be very devastating in the cut.
I want to talk about that because that's actually one of the more significant comparisons between the rapier and the katana now is actually cutting capacity. But to do that, there are some distant demonstrations. So let's quickly move to where we got a bit more room. Okay, so there is absolutely a discussion to be had about cutting capacity. Before we do that, I want to compare probably one of the most devastating differences between these swords: reach.
Did you want to hold them both out?
You stretch out. Oh yeah, I know. Look at this, right? Like if I wanted to, I could easily strike at Tyranth's hand without him even being able to threaten me.
And on top of that, the guard that you have getting through that will be a little bit trickier.
This alone puts the katana at one of the most severe disadvantages in a duel scenario.
Sure, but yes, but at the same time, if I compare like a war sword versus a short sword, reach advantage is always an advantage.
It's actually a game-changing advantage.
Yeah.
And just on that premise alone, the katana is going to lose out quite a lot. But okay, let's try and even out a little bit. How about we grab the O katana? Gosh, that's a sexy sword. This comes from Sword Is, made through their katana builder.
Made out of S5. Not sure if the review is out yet.
Yeah.
It's an explosive one.
It is an explosive review, actually. But one of the impressive things about the Sword Is katana builder, they offer a wide range of premium options that you don't usually see on katana builders, like S5 shock-resistant tool steel being one of them, which is what this sword is made out of. It's crazy.
And this thing is incredibly light. Like, no joke, one hand, no worries at all. I know you're not supposed to one-hand it, but
I love it.
It's beautiful.
But check out the review. Okay, so look at their... All right. This is actually... They're about the same length.
Sure.
Okay.
But you still have a better guard than me.
I do. So even with reach being nullified and made equivalent, the rapier has a big advantage because of this hand protection.
This is something. All right, these are sharp swords. We can't hit these together. We can't spar with these. There is an interesting dynamic because it is curved. I could perhaps, if you, at length again, yeah, could perhaps curve into the guard.
Yeah, stabbing. There's always a possibility of stabbing through the guard. It is difficult to do. And if you're doing the thing and you're moving around and you're defending yourself, it's actually really hard to pull off. Like, you couldn't protect yourself quite well with it.
Sure, but with this is something that's a benefit with curved swords. Because they are curved, the moment you, all of a sudden, the point has absolutely changed where it is. So I'm already in your guard much easier than a straight sword.
Maybe.
That's a benefit of a curved sword.
You would have to be really mindful to take advantage of it, but maybe.
I mean,
maybe.
if you're trained with it, you should be able to do that.
I'll give that a maybe. So now we come to the other point that we want to talk about, which is a big caveat in the comparison between these two: cutting. And part of that cutting is stopping power.
Yes, a rapier can cut. It's not useless at it, but it is nowhere on the level of this.
Let's just be honest. Yes. We got a dedicated review of this rapier. It's by Windless, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Windless.
Okay. And my brain reset with how well you could cut with it.
But there's a caveat to that.
With wrist cuts. Like,
there's a caveat.
But it's nowhere near as powerful cutting as a katana.
Nowhere near. And this is the thing, is like, when we do sword comparisons, I like to compare them just as the tools themselves. Because the moment I say, well, what if we're wearing armor? All of a sudden that loses some more points.
Yeah, it's good at getting through the gaps.
Yeah, but like thrusting through armor itself.
Such good point control. You have better chances of thrusting into like the visor.
That is true.
Than the katana.
I want to hold the rapier.
Okay.
You hold the katana.
I do like this katana. I'm okay with that because I like the katana.
Yeah.
This is my favorite katana.
And that's why I just want to compare them as the tools themselves.
Yes.
In terms of the rapier, the point control is perfect. This thing is a thrusting beast.
Oh, it's amazing.
Obviously, that's why they're so deadly.
Well, that's the thing. People have compared thrust versus cuts a lot. Multiple videos, multiple kind of comparisons, tests, and what we generally find is that thrusts are actually more deadly, especially if you're able to get in, internal organs.
Yes.
Cuts can be more survivable, but cuts have more stopping power and can offend a wider range.
Sure.
So a good, powerful cutting sword can offend, push away a larger amount of opponents because you can do these wide, and I'm being very careful because this is a sharp sword and Tyranth isn't aiming, wide sweeping, maneuvers to keep people at bay. And it's threatening because you don't want to get cut with this. Yeah. This can do serious damage, even though cuts can be more survivable. And by the way, like I've seen, for educational purposes, I've looked up machete attack videos. And it's actually scary how many cuts people get and they keep going. But anyway.
Yes. But this is the thing, it's like this is a personal preference thing. I prefer a tool that can do a lot of things effectively rather than one specialized tool.
But it does it so well.
It does, but...
Because are you sure about that, Tyranth?
Yes, I am.
Okay, really? Because what about a gun? It can do one thing really, 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 really well.
All right, I'm just going to say this from the depths of my soul, from all the people who watch Shadiversity in the comments. Shad, you. We're not talking about that. We're talking about swords.
That needs to be bleeped.
Do not bring up guns. We know guns
I'm
beat
right.
everything.
But it's one of those rare examples where you can have something that does one thing so devastatingly well that it overcomes any other shortcomings.
But you also carry a knife with a gun because a knife is a tool. Things like that, where a sword, yes, it is a weapon, but it can also be used as a tool.
But in the realm of a rapier, I actually think that the rapier maximizes its reach and its thrusting capacity so far that I think it offsets its... It can still cut, but it can't cut as well. And that's why I think the rapier is actually a more devastating dueling weapon by far than a longsword, even though a longsword is more versatile.
I mean, they're not far off length. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that, but from memory, they're very equivalent.
But there is a difference. Because a rapier is one-handed, you can turn your body on the side and extend your reach further than a two-handed sword, because with a two-handed sword you've got to bring it back to get it in. So, do you want to compare? Like, let me go behind you.
Oh, I got two swords.
Okay.
Hold on.
You two-handed, stretch as far forward as you can, and I will go behind you and then see if I can stretch past your point.
I'll go this.
So, go here. Two hands. No, two hands.
But you don't have to use it two-handed. I have the option. You don't, really.
If you're using it one hand, you'll get the same reach, but a rapier is more efficient one-handed weapon.
Generalised.
No. It's a more efficient weapon one-handed, where this is made to be used one-handed and a longsword is made to be used in two-handed.
But I have the option.
But if you're doing one-handed, you do not have the point control or thrusting capacity. But
I don't know.
Just to show,
this is a pretty light longsword.
Just to show, I'm going to put my foot in the same position you are. Okay, let's line this up. Two hands on it. Stretch forward. As far as you can go forward, like it comfortably so. And if I was to do rapier...
That's because I'm with two hands.
Exactly, that's the point.
But I can also do one hand. I can do one hand.
But it's like one-hand longsword, one-hand rapier, there's no contest.
Sure.
One-handed rapier has way more control, way more deadly, faster.
But again, this is where we get into the real caveat part. How good a user is. You can watch sparring videos with katanas versus rapier, versus longsword versus rapier, and
obviously,
it's
grab the katana. Especially talk about the katana. Yes, what Tyranth is saying here is absolutely correct. Skill can overcome nearly every disadvantage, though there are some advantages that skill is never going to be overcome.
That is true. That is true.
I'm not sure the reach is devastating.
The reach is devastating, but this is where I just have a bit of a personal opinion. In terms of a tool, because I value things differently, I prefer more generalized applications of it rather than highly specialized ones. Okay,
that is your subjective preference though, but on an objective metric, I think it's pretty clear. The rapier, thrusting capacity, hand protection.
Versus a katana. Sure, I will definitely give you these things,
Yeah.
especially if we're talking more of this
standard size katana.
31-inch katana. These are very short, and in terms of actually dueling versus something like this, even if I am 10 times better, you've got an advantage right off the bat because of that reach, because of this protection.
Now, that doesn't mean that the person with the rapier will win all the time. It means they have an advantage, an edge.
Yeah.
That could be mitigated through skill, luck, okay? But generally speaking, I think the rapier vastly, they're like on an objective scale, is got the edge over the katana.
Sure.
007 sword fight, I think it's, I forget, it's not Tomorrow Never Dies.
I know which one you're talking about, with Pierce Brosnan.
It's Pierce Brosnan and his sword fighting guy, and the guy grabs a katana and chops his the rapier that 007, James Bond, is using in half, and that's just, no, it's actually kind of the reverse. I'm not sure if you're new to the channel, we have tested more traditionally made katanas again and again and again, and they're older methods of manufacturing, a very clever method to maximize the higher quality steel on the edge, all right? It's actually an economic method of making a sword. As a result, they are less durable and prone to bending more. Where rapiers were made in the Renaissance, when the sword quality was actually getting pretty good in Europe, it was already pretty good in the medieval period, but it was getting more consistently good. And the reason why they could get away with making such thin blades like this, do you want to flex that there, Tyranth? Because of spring steel. That's why. If you make this out of iron, it'd be a crap sword.
Yeah.
It would bend and just suck. You can only make a rapier
with the heat treating
yes.
method that is used on katanas, because it is differentially hardened. It means that it has two different springiness. So if you hit it on like the side or the spine, it's going to behave very different to a blade like this that has a consistent hardness.
It has
which
a
means
through hardness.
it does a spring motion. They're different.
And so, look, if we really wanted to go even further, we were comparing like, just pretending that they were equivalently made in the same quality. But if you would take the historical quality of the steel that is usually in both blades, that does give another big advantage to the rapier.
That's why I don't like talking about it, because as soon as we do that, the katana just loses all the time. Which is, there are some swords that are reasonable, like a falchion or a messer. They're reasonable, and they're single-edged, curved.
What do you guys think? Have we been fair in our discussion and analysis? Did we get something wrong? Share it in the comments below. And
If we weren't clear, the rapier won.
I said it has the edge in a big way. If you're interested in another comparison, you can check out katana versus messer or two-handed falchion.
Yeah, let me know in the comments if you think rapier versus longsword, which is better. And when I say better, I don't mean better at a specific thing. I mean just
generally, because dueling it's rapier, but generally, because as soon as you bring in crowd control, that is a... Let us know in the comments and check out katana versus messer right there. Thanks, guys.